Hi everyone, welcome back to my lesson. Hope you had a good week and hope you're doing really well on this Saturday afternoon. Today's lesson is IELTS writing, so we're going to focus on task 1, writing. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you now. So, welcome to IELTS writing, task 1. My name is Shazia, hope you're doing well. So in today's lesson, we will be having a look at writing formal letters. So that's the overview of today's lesson, because on the last lesson, if you look at the last lesson, we did focus on writing informal letters. So we went through that in a lot of detail. So we're planning to do the same thing in this lesson, go through writing formal letters with a lot of detail, so that you can always refer back to this lesson, because the lesson is live. But if you are watching the lesson after the time of it being live, then you can refer back to it and you can actually make notes, you can actually look back, and this lesson should give you all of the information that you need in order to get a band 9 scoring for your IELTS writing task 1 exam. So let's focus on the general writing task 1, formal letter. So the topic area is writing formal letters. What I must tell you, what I must let you know really, is that there's not a lot of difference between informal, semi-informal and formal letters. There's only about 2% of your grammar and vocabulary that will change. So basically, only 2% of your grammar and vocabulary will change. Any questions? Please comment them in the comment box and I'll try to get back to you within today's lesson. So let's have a look at a formal letter. It has a number of conventions, and it's about the layout, the language, and the tone that you should follow. So obviously, with an informal letter, the layout, the language, and the tone that you're using will be different. Formal letters could include like letters of making a complaint, questioning a decision, making a travel reservation. So any of those are included in writing formal letters. So your attention area in any letter that you're writing for your IELTS, is your language is basically 98% the same, and the structure of the letter is the same. So in task 1, you should spend about 20 minutes on the task. So let me show you the task. So this is an example taken from the IELTS exam. So if you have a look at the example, it says task 1, and then it says you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. And here, over here would be your task. So you live in a room in college which you share with another student. However, there are many problems with this arrangement and you find it very difficult to work. Write a letter to the accommodation officer at the college. In the letter, describe the situation. Explain your problems and why it is difficult to work. Say what kind of accommodation you would prefer. So at the bottom here, if you have a look, it says write at least 150 words. You do not need to write any addresses, and begin your letter as follows: Dear Sir or Madam. So as we know by looking at the letter that we must spend 20 minutes only on this task. So let me show you the task again. So if you have a look at the task, it's very much the same as we discussed the informal letters. So this would be the task 1. So it depends on the day which one you get. You might get formal, informal, or semi-informal. So as I showed you, straight away you scan it and you see that it says write at least 150 words. So let's have a look. At the bottom it says write 150 words. Make sure to read the scenario as this gives the background information. So the part that's in the box, this over here is the scenario. So you make sure that you read this. So read this a couple of times, this part in the box. Make sure to read that really well. Let's get back to this. You have to act fast, because as soon as you see that you've got 20 minutes to do the task, immediately you know that you need to act fast. Obviously, again, you have 20 minutes only to spend on the task. So quickly have a look what's in front of you. So the next steps, what we can see here are two things. We can see a background scenario that paints a picture of what's happening, and then you see 3 bullet points. Them 3 bullet points that you see are critical. They are absolutely critical, the 3 bullet points that you see, because they are the questions that they're asking you. So these 3 bullet points here are the questions. So one's asking you describe the situation, one's asking you to explain your problems and why it's difficult to work, and the third one asking you say what kind of accommodation you would prefer. So there's 3 questions and they want to see you answering these 3 questions in your letter. So let's have a quick look at the example letter that I have done. So this is an example letter that I've done for the IELTS. Right, so what I'm going to do is now read my letter that I've written. So I've started it exactly the way that they have asked me to. So it clearly said, "Dear Sir" or "Madam." So I've used exactly what they've asked me to do. And to open it, I've started with, "I am writing to let you know that I am unhappy with my current living conditions. While the accommodation itself is fine, so I don't have any issue with the accommodation, my housemate has become intolerable, making it almost impossible for me to work. I hope you will consider my situation favourably." So there I've given some general information, what my formal letter is about. And that's my first paragraph. So I've covered that in my first, briefly, just like brief information in my first paragraph. Then I've moved on to the second paragraph, which says, "Let me explain my situation." Again, this is where I start explaining my situation. So exactly the second bullet point to explain. So let me explain my situation. The trouble started about 3 months ago, when my housemate first moved in. Prior to that, everything was fine. My old housemate was extremely considerate. My current housemate, however, stays up almost all night and plays incessantly loud music. As such, I have not been able to sleep properly and therefore cannot concentrate on my studies. So can you see how cleverly I've explained the situation? So I've gone into detail. I've used my creative skills and my imaginative skills here. In my third paragraph, I've actually put in the request. So exactly the third bullet point in the IELTS exam was to make a request. So what I've done is very cleverly added that in. So in my third paragraph, it says, "Would you kindly transfer me or my housemate to another room? I would much prefer to live with someone who is quieter and more considerate of others. As long as it is quiet, I don't mind whom I live with." So that's my third paragraph. And then I've ended it with, "Thank you for your consideration," and then "yours faithfully." And then obviously just ended it with my name, Shazia. So let me just go back to the slides now. So there's my letter if you have a look at it. And if you have a look at it, there's my first paragraph, there's my second paragraph, and there's my third paragraph. So remember, IELTS are really strict with the writing. So the writing part, they're really strict. So you don't want to make any mistakes. So let's look at the example. And obviously they said spend 20 minutes on this task. You live in a room in college which you share with another student. However, there are many problems with this arrangement and you find it very difficult to work. Write a letter to the accommodation officer at the college. In the letter, so as soon as we're writing a letter to the accommodation officer, we know straight away that this is a formal letter. There's the 3 criteria that they expect us to follow. So in the first paragraph, describe the situation. In the second paragraph, explain your problems and why it is difficult to work. And thirdly, say what kind of accommodation you prefer. So this example letter of mine would get you an IELTS of 9. And now you'd like to know the reason why. So let me discuss the reasoning for this. So the reasoning for this is that paragraph 1 refers to bullet point 1. And bullet point 2, paragraph 2 refers to it. And the same with the third paragraph, bullet point 3. So as you wanted to know that, why? Because there are 4 specific criteria that the examiners look for. Number 1, they want you to write on the topic. So they've set the topic, they've set the scenario, they want you to write on that. So what you don't want to do is lose focus and start writing about a different topic. So you want to be, also what the second thing they want you to do is they want you to use precise vocabulary. So you need to know the words that you are using, that you have chosen, are correct. So you don't want to make a mistake with your vocabulary. Thirdly, they want you to use accurate grammar. Fourthly, what they want is they want you to use a logical structure. So that's with your writing, it needs to be structured. The same way as we discussed informal letters, that your writing must be structured. And we discussed how important it is to have a structured balance in your paragraphs. So you don't want one really long paragraph and one really short. They've got to have near enough the same amount of words in each paragraph. The criteria simply means the examiners have a scoring system. So they have a sheet with the criteria in front of them, which they look at your work and then they mark you. So they have a number sheet with criteria, and then they can reflect on what you've written with the criteria and see if you've met the criteria. So there you go. They have a look at your essay or your writing and they mark it against the criteria checklist. So they have a checklist in front of them and they have a look at your work and mark it against that. They only look at 4 things though. So make sure you write on the topic. You have the bullet points and you stick to answering the bullet points and you don't go off the topic. So you make sure that you stick to the topic that they have set. So they set a topic where in this case it was about a student and his housemate being very noisy and him requesting to have a transfer. So again, we kept our letter with regards to the topic that they've set. We didn't go off the topic. So never deviate from the prompt, which specifically it means you understand the scenario. That's what they're looking at, that they've set your scenario and then they're checking that you understand that and you understand what the topic is based on. So make sure you don't blend your paragraphs. This is the hardest part. Making sure each paragraph answers the bullet point and only relates to that. So you're not going off the first bullet point, you're just answering that. And you're not blending everything into the paragraphs. So paragraph 1, I've described the situation. So in my letter, I've had a look at the examination question and then I've described in paragraph 1. In paragraph 2, I've explained the problems and difficulties exactly the way they're asking me in the bullet point. I've explained in a lot of detail the problem and the difficulties that I'm facing. And paragraph 3, I've asked for different accommodation. In other words, I've done the 3: describe, explain, and asked. Remember, your vocabulary is not necessarily single words. There can be phrases of up to 5 words, so you can use phrases or you can use single words. Or it can be a collocation of words that come together as well. Think of using vocabulary like conditions, intolerable, almost. So you've seen them in my letter. So I used all 3 of these words. I used condition, intolerable, almost, and I used them with confidence. And almost impossible, which are a phrase or collocation of 2 words. So the phrase I used was consider my situation favourably. So if you remember in my letter, I used this phrase, consider my situation favourably. And then I use transfer, which is a single verb, but a really nice way which shows good understanding of vocabulary. So although it's a single word, transfer, and it's a verb, but it shows a good understanding of vocabulary. Because it's a synonym for change as well. So I could have said change my accommodation, but transfer is a better word to use. So if you see quieter, some more considerate, these are adjectives. So I've made sure that I've used adjectives. So therefore you want to choose a variety of words. You don't want to just use the same words repetitively, because if you keep using the same words, it doesn't show that you have confidence. In order to show the examiner that you have a lot of confidence, you need to use a variety of words. Again, just make sure that you're using them correctly and you have confidence that you know what the words mean. Yeah, so only use words that you are familiar and sure of. If you're unsure of it, you're better off not to use it, because you will get a down scoring. And they are, like we said, IELTS are very strict with the criteria of writing task 1. So don't put in words you're unsure of. If these are wrong or even semantically wrong, then you'll be marked down. So that's why it's really important that make sure you're using the correct words and you're very confident that you know that that word fits in there. So choose words wisely. So a good one, think of almost. 2 words that connect perfectly. Verbs, so use a variety of different verbs. A good start is try present simple, past simple, present perfect. So a good example is use words is, explain, started, was. So you can see how they're in different tenses: past, they're in present, they're in past perfect. Remember to use the correct verb to be precise regarding the time it happened. So happened, because it's the ED, that's connected with happen, it shows that it's already happened, it's in something of the past. So make sure that if you are using verbs to show the precise time that they happened, that it is incorrect, that you are using the correct verb there. Express the time as you want it to be expressed in the tense that you use. So if you're expressing something happened in the past, you don't want to use a verb of the present, because that just won't sound right and it doesn't go together. So if you're describing something that happened in the past and finished in the past, then the best tense to use is past simple, because it's happened in the past and it's finished in the past. And remember, don't mix your verbs, as we use these to precise. Once you figure this, you see the grammar will become flawless. So make sure that your verbs basically fit in the space of time that when the event happened. Let's have a look at articles and nouns. So remember, all of this is relating to the writing, and we're just trying to have a look at the topic of writing a formal letter. So an article is a word that identifies or modifies a noun. A noun may be a person, a place, thing, or an idea. So you must remember that a noun is a person or a place or a thing or an idea. And you must remember the plural, so conditions, you can add the S on and make it plural. And when we use the with the accommodation, we're using the as the article. So the has become an article here because we're referring to a specific accommodation, as we could say an accommodation could be anywhere. But because we are referring to a specific accommodation, we've used the as the article, and the accommodation has become specific. For singular, like housemate is singular. The trouble here, the is the article and it's specific to the trouble. So if we said the trouble, we know that we are referring to the specific trouble that the housemate is causing. So you must be able to identify when the noun requires the S. So you must be able to identify when you've got the noun and when you should add the S at the end to make it plural, and when you shouldn't add the S at the end and you should keep it singular. So that's a good thing to revise on that. So is it one or more than one? It's simple, one or more than one. So is it one cat or cats, more than one? For example, would it be correct to use conditions or condition? So make sure to use the article correctly too. The makes it specific. A or an means you could be referring to anything, as these are determiners. So if you add a or an, you could be referring to anything, anywhere. So if I said an ice rink, it means I could be referring to any ice rink anywhere. But if I said the ice rink, I'm meaning a specific place. Hope that makes sense. Adverbs and adjectives. So adverbs are words that modify everything, but not everything but apart from nouns and pronouns. And adjectives are words that describe nouns or pronouns. So let's look at some examples from my letter, some adjective examples. So we had unhappy, we had impossible, fine, intolerable, considerate, quite. Quite is a good adjective. Let's look at some adverb examples from my letter. So I had almost, favorably, extremely, incessantly, properly. So prepositions are a word that tells you where or when something is in relation to something else. So for example, the house was on the hill beside a tree. In this sentence, on and beside are prepositions. So if you think, just have a look at it here. So on and beside are the prepositions because they show you exactly where the house was. So we know the house was on the hill. So we know it was on the hill. So on here is a preposition. Beside a tree, again, exactly, tells us exactly where the house was. So they are prepositions. Other examples of prepositions that are mentioned in my letter: with, for, about. So when you write your letter, you have to write a mixture. So you want a mixture of simple sentences and then some longer, complex sentences. So you don't want just a letter of just simple sentences, and you don't want a letter full of long, complex sentences. What you want is a variety. So the examiners can see the length of your sentences. Therefore, think about words that connect sentences. So you have these short sentences, and then you can connect them to another sentence by using simple words like because, that, which. So if you think of a simple sentence, like I used the trouble started about 3 months ago. So you can see how you can use words to connect a simple sentence and make it into a complex, longer sentence by using words that connect two sentences together, like because, that, which. There's many other words that you can use. So what I want you to do as well is remember the formula. So you have a subject, a verb, and an object. And this is a formula basic, back to basics when you are writing a simple sentence. So you have a subject, you have a verb, and you have your object. And then by using the connecting word, like because, we can plug them with another sentence. So you just plug two sentences together by using a connecting word like because. Complex sentence. So a complex sentence is a sentence that contains one independent and at least one dependent clause. So let me give you a little example here. So the example is, before the bell rang, teacher collected their work. So and here has connected these two sentences together. And also remember with the IELTS, simple clarity beats complex unclarity, if that makes sense. So keeping it simple and clear will win over if you have complex and it's so unclear and it's so difficult to make sense of. Also, memorize the structure. Remember, it's simple. You just need to space out and balance the paragraphs exactly the way I've taught you in the informal letter and now in the formal letter. It's all about balancing and spacing out your paragraphs. So you don't want one paragraph page long and one with two lines. That's not correct. Basically, just balancing. But you don't need the exact same count of words, but just near enough, as long as they just look similar to each other. So each paragraph will always be the same in IELTS Task 1. You'll have the reason, the explanation, and the request. So if you remember that, if you remember the three criteria, that you'll have the reason, the explanation, and the request. So for the first paragraph in the IELTS Writing Task 1, you can memorize to begin with, I am writing to let you know. So you can always use that to open your first paragraph. And in the paragraph 2, you can memorize, let me explain my situation. So you can always use that because it's going to ask you to explain. And paragraph 3, you can always begin that with, would you kindly. But what I want you to do is read and really understand the scenario. It's very important. Once you grasp the scenario, you can answer the 3 questions that are based on that scenario. And you can use this format for every single Writing Task 1 letter. So it's the same format every time. So the greeting was precise in where we looked at the example of the exam question. They actually gave you the greeting, dear sir or madam. Usually in a lot of formal letters, we don't know the person we're writing to. And then the reason, I'm writing to let you know that I. So the explanation, let me explain my situation. The request. So if you're requesting something, a good way to request it is, would you kindly, and then begin your request. The way you end it is, thank you for your consideration. And you can sign off with yours faithfully. Faithfully is a good word to use because we don't know the person that we're writing to. And then obviously you sign it off with your name. So when doing this task, be creative and be imaginative as much as possible. And really try to put yourself in this student's shoes and try to really grasp the situation and imagine that you're in the situation. In paragraph 1, cover all the general information. So you don't want too much detail. You just want to open the letter and give them the general information. And then in paragraph 2, you want the detailed information. So think of this. Paragraph 1, you give the reason for writing. Paragraph 2, you explain in detail. Paragraph 3, you're requesting or suggesting. So the opening of your letter, the greeting or the salutation, dear sir or madam, you can always use this. So in any formal letter, you can use this if you don't know the name of the person. So if they had given you, you're writing a letter to Mr. Johnson, for example, then you would use that. But if there's no name, there's no mention of a name, you can always use dear sir or madam in a formal letter. And when you end the letter, you end it with yours faithfully, because we don't know the name of the person, just like we discussed earlier that we don't know the name of the person. Remember with formal letters to use the block or modified block format. So the entire letter is left justified and single spaced, except for a double space between the paragraphs. And the closing is your final sign off. It should be brief and courteous. It begins 2 lines after your final body paragraph. And make sure to capitalize only the first word of the closing and end with the comma. So let's see, for example, yours faithfully. So you can see yours has a capital letter and then faithfully, and then we've just got a comma, and the F there is not capitalized. With formal letters, add 4 lines of spacing below your closing and then type your name. So before your name, just add 4 lines of spacing. And in formal letters, you should include your full name or your signed name. So for example, J. Franks, that's your signing off name. Or you could actually put your full name there. So I'm just going to go back to see if anyone's got any questions. So hi to everyone, and thank you for joining today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it gave you enough information for the general writing task 1. And we covered in today's lesson the formal letter. And if you look at the last lesson, we covered the informal letter. This was just general basic letter writing, which could come up in your task 1. If you do have any questions on today's lesson, please do comment and let me know, because I'll join you next week on Saturday at the same time with another lesson. And if you have any ideas for my next lesson, please do comment. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Look after yourself and take care. And see you soon. Thank you. Bye for now.